Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So today I'm here to take GST class on the topic tax invoice, credit note, and debit note. Just a second. Okay. So till now, you all must have done the important topics like registration, input tax credit, supply, and lots of other topics. So we'll be taking tax invoice, credit note, and debit note. So it's a request. We can make a class interactive. If you have any doubts, you can raise your hand or you can post your query in the chat box. And later on, I'll be giving you a few minutes to ask the question on audio also. Okay. So let's start. So before tax invoice, we all must be knowing what is invoice. Invoice is basically what a document which contains the details of buyer and seller. It contains the amount, quantity, the description of goods. You all must have seen the invoice in some way or other. Whenever you are purchasing anything from any market, you are getting the invoice. And one more thing, if GST is applicable, definitely the invoice that you might have seen is the tax invoice. Okay, so first of all, we are here to see what is tax invoice. So in this session, we'll be doing tax invoice, credit note, and debit note. So today, first we'll be doing tax invoice and we'll try to cover the tax invoice part. The invoice or the tax invoice is being defined in section 2, and only one line meaning is given over there. It is said means tax invoice means the invoice, tax invoice referred to in section 31. It doesn't mean that the definition and explanation is complete, because it is only saying that it contains all the details related to tax invoice is being contained in section 31. I have a little bad throat today. गला बैठा हुआ है. Fine. So whatever is there mentioned in section 31, read with different rules, all the relevant provisions, rules and regulations related to tax invoice are written therein. We'll be coming to that. But before going into that, we should know certain terminology which are defined in the GST law itself. Number one is exempt supply. I think you must have studied this exempt supply in your past classes. I won't go into detail, just I'm discussing in very short. The supply which attracts nil rate of tax or which is exempted under section 11. Government GST Council issued notifications in which they exempt different goods and services. Okay, and it also includes non-taxable supply. It means the supplies which are outside the purview of GST, Schedule 3 item, all those are also included in exempt supply. Because when we will be discussing the provision of tax invoice, there is separate concept for the exempt supply. The document that will be issuing for exempt supply is little different. That's why we should know the meaning of exempt supply. Okay, now the next point is continuous supply of goods. This also you might have studied in the earlier class while discussing the time of supply concept. So continuous supply of goods means under a single contract, when there is continuous supply of goods, different money in installments, you can say, or on a regular basis, some goods are supplied. Like we can take example, say for example, like oil. The pipeline is there, oil is supplied through pipeline, and what quantity is delivered is at many times not pre-decided. It will be decided at a regular interval, and then accordingly invoice will be based. So here, under a contract, the supply is on a regular basis through wire, cable, pipeline, or any other conduit. Okay, and for this, invoices are also raised on a periodic basis, because it is not possible to raise invoice on daily basis in case of these kind of supplying. So the law permits that the invoice can be raised on a periodic basis. So let us read once the definition of continuous supply of goods. A supply of goods which is provided or agreed to be provided continuously or on a recurrent basis under a contract, whether or not by means of a wire, cable, pipeline, or other conduit. This line says it is not necessary that it has to be supplied by way of wire, cable, pipeline, or other conduit. These are just the example where the supply is being done by wire, cable, you can say internet and all, pipeline, that is for gases, etc., for which supplier invoices the recipient on a regular or periodic basis at a regular interval. That can be a month or it can be a quarter. On that basis, invoices will be issued. And it will also include supply of such goods as government may notify. But till now, there is no such notification which classifies any goods, any supply of goods as continuous supply of goods by government. Similar is continuous supply of services. This is also having the same meaning like that of goods, but the only difference is here the period should be of more than 3 months. You can see over here, the first point is similar, supply of services which is provided or agreed to be provided continuously or on a recurring basis for a period exceeding 3 months with the periodical payment obligation. We can take example of software. In case of software, what happens at many times, the billing will be done on the basis of usage, how much you are using the software. Like we can take the example, like online classes is being conducted, online license has been sold. So a person is taking the software, but the billing will be done on the basis of number of license that will be utilized by the recipient. So in this case, there can be n number of license. It can be 10, 20, 30, 40. So it will be determined only on a periodical basis. So here also the continuous supply of services can be applied. But the most important point over here is that the period of continuous supply of service should be of more than 3 months. Then only it will be classified as continuous supply of service. Otherwise, it won't be treated as continuous supply of services. So the important criteria on the basis of which on exam also you can get a question, that 3 months criteria is very important for continuous supply of service. There is no such criteria in case of goods. You can see over here the definition of continuous supply of goods. There is no such criteria, but in case of services, there is the 3 months criteria. Okay, so these 2 points will be required when we'll discuss the tax invoice concept in our section. Okay, so now let us move to the tax invoice. So as I discussed, invoice means any document that you are giving containing the relevant particulars with respect to the goods that is being sold. But when we are talking about tax invoice, it has to be as per the section 31, read with rule 46 to 48. It means we have to discuss the provisions of section 31 also, as well as rule 46 to 48 of Central Goods and Service Tax Act. Okay, so a registered person who is supplying taxable goods or taxable services have to issue invoice in accordance with these sections and rules, and then this invoice will be known as tax invoice. In fact, in the whole law, GST law, wherever, even if invoice word is being used, we have to assume that invoice means tax invoice. So a tax invoice can be issued by a registered person when he's supplying taxable goods or services. And the invoice that will be issued by the supplier has also to be uploaded in his return that is GSTR1 इलेक्ट्रॉनिकली हम लोग को उसको क्या करना होगा, अपलोड करना होगा GSTR1 में. सीरियल नंबर जो भी है, सारे यूनिक फीचर्स हम लोग पढ़ेंगे, उसके बेसिस पे दैट हैज टू बी अपलोडेड. ओके, सो नाउ दिस इनवॉइस, the supplier who will issue this invoice have to issue in multiple copies. What the multiple copies will be? In case of supply of goods, when the supplier is supplying goods, it has to be made in 3 copies. Okay, so the original copy will be given to the recipient. It means who is buying goods or availing our services. Supplier की जो goods और services avail कर रहा है, he will get the original invoice, and the duplicate one will be given to the transporter. As we are discussing for the goods has to be transported, so transporter will carry the duplicate, the second invoice, and the third copy, that is the triplicate copy, that will be retained by the supplier. Supplier उसको retain करेगा. So there has to be 3 copies. Okay, but again, in case of supply of services, in supply of services there is no need of any transportation. As there will be no need of any transportation, so in that case the second copy is not required. I mean to say, the copy which is required for the transporter will not be needed. So in case of services, only dual copies required, double copies required. One will be for the recipient and other will be for the supplier. It means supplier will retain the duplicate one and the original one will be given to the recipient. So these are the provisions with respect to the number of copies that has to be made for any supply of goods or services. So I again repeat, for supply of goods, triplicate copies, and for supply of services will need only 2 copies. खाली 2 copies चाहिएगी in case of supply of services. Okay, now there are different rules regarding preparation of tax invoice. In case of supply of goods there is different, and in case of supply of services there is different. So let us first discuss what will be the timeline for issue of tax invoice in case of supply of goods. Look, I'll be reading word by word. First, let us understand the concept. In case of supply of goods, the invoice has to be prepared at the time of supply or before that. It means supply जब आप कर रहे हो उस वक्त तक इनवॉइस बन जाना चाहिए. And one more thing I want to add on, tax invoice timing is important because government will receive revenue on the basis of this tax invoice. भाई जब tax invoice बनेगा उसके बेसिस पे ही गवर्नमेंट को रेवेन्यू मिलेगी. So that's why its timing is very important. So I come back again. In case of goods, what is the timeline? आप जब गुड्स रिमूव कर रहे हो, आपकी फैक्ट्री में गुड्स है, यू आर रिमूविंग द गुड्स फॉर डिलीवरी. इन दैट केस रिमूवल ऑफ गुड्स के पहले, जस्ट बिफोर द रिमूवल ऑफ गुड्स, यू हैव टू मेक अ टैक्स इनवॉइस. ओके, एट मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम इट हैपेंस दैट सप्लायर इज नॉट डिलीवरिंग द गुड्स. भाई उसने सेल कर दिया, now it's the responsibility of the customer to take the delivery of the goods. So in that case what will happen, भाई जब सप्लायर ने गुड्स की हैंडओवर कर दी उसको अपनी फैक्ट्री के गेट पे, या फिर उसने गुड्स को अवेलेबल कर दिया कस्टमर के लिए कि भाई अब आप यहां से लेके जा सकते हो, at that time tax invoice has to be made by the supplier. Okay, so there are 2 points in this. Number one, when supplier himself is delivering the goods, then in that case, when the goods will be removed by the supplier, invoice has to be prepared at that time or before that. But in case supplier is not removing the goods, in that case, जब भी supplier goods available करा दे रहे customer को for the delivery, at that time or before that, tax invoice has to be prepared. This is with respect to goods. Okay. Now, in case of services, what will happen? It has to be issued before services also. But in case of services, the law allows that invoice can also be issued after the provision of services. But a timeline has been given. After the provision of services, 30 days ka timeline is given. It means, suppose we have provided the services. Now, after that, within 30 days, invoice has to be issued by the supplier. In case of banking insurance company, this timeline of 30 days has been recommended as 45 days in the law. It means for banking insurance and NBFC companies, invoice can be issued within 45 days of the provision of the services. But in case of any other services, invoice has to be issued within 30 days of the services. Okay, let us read this once, what is written in the law. We can see over here. First, let's see in case of goods. What I explained, it should be issued before or at the time of. We can get a question on this also. कि tax invoice can be issued before. In fact, before आप कितना भी पहले issue कर दो, there is no problem to the department because you are issuing and you will be paying tax. Because अगर आप एक बार tax invoice issue कर देते हो, आपकी tax liability वहां पे arise हो जाएगी. तो before आप कितना भी पहले कर दो, government will not say anything, department will not say anything. But you can't go beyond that. अगर आप टाइमलाइन के बियॉन्ड जाएंगे, then there will be liability of interest. वो बाद में डिस्कस करेंगे. Look, it should be issued before or at the time of what? 2 points are there. Number one, removal of goods for supply to the recipient, where the supply involves movement of goods. It means we can read like that. Tax invoice should be issued before or at the time of delivery, before or at the time of removal of goods for supply to the recipient, where supply involves movement of goods. अगर मेरी तरफ से मूवमेंट होने का है तो उसके पहले मुझे टैक्स इनवॉइस इशू करना होगा. Second case, when delivery of goods at the time of delivery of goods or making available thereof to the recipient in India. मतलब आप एक्स फैक्ट्री सेल हो रहा है, कस्टमर आपके यहां से डिलीवरी ले लेगा. तो कस्टमर जब आपके यहां से डिलीवरी ले रहा है, दैट इज एज गुड एज डिलीवरी फ्रॉम माय साइड, बट आई एम नॉट मेकिंग एनी मूवमेंट. इफ आई एम मेकिंग एनी मूवमेंट, दैट विल कम इन क्लॉज ए. इफ आई एम नॉट मेकिंग एनी मूवमेंट, देन इट विल कम इन क्लॉज बी. तो यहां पे जब डिलीवरी कर रहे हैं, कस्टमर आके मेरे गेट से ले लिया, या फिर मैंने गुड्स अवेलेबल करा लिए, कस्टमर लिया भी नहीं है, in that case also we have to issue tax invoice. I hope this point is clear to everyone. So in case of goods, tax invoice कब raise करना है? Before the movement, or simply we can say before the sale या at the time of sale. उसके पहले या उस वक्त तक हम लोग को tax invoice issue करना है in case of goods. While in case of services, as I discussed, it should be issued before or after. It means in case of services, invoice is allowed that it can also be issued after the provision of services. But there is a cap of 30 days. Within 30 days, you have to issue the invoice. Okay. And this timeline, as I discussed, is 45 days in case of banking company, insurance company, financial institutions, and non-banking finance company. Okay. There is one more point in this. If there are distinct person in case of banking insurance companies, I hope you all know the meaning of distinct person. Still, I say in one line, if any person having the same PAN is having different registrations, more than one registration, then the different registration या जो भी और registrations हैं उनको क्या बोलेंगे? Distinct person. Say for example, there is one person whose business is located in 5 different states. He is making supply from 5 different states. So in that case, he have to take 5 registration in different states, and वो 5 registrations को हम लोग क्या बोलेंगे? Distinct person बोलेंगे. So let's come back to this. In case of banking and insurance company, also NBFC, telecom and financial institutions, the law permits to issue the invoice at the quarter end. If the supply is among the distinct person के बीच में अगर कोई सप्लाई है, मतलब एक स्टेट से दूसरे स्टेट में कुछ सप्लाई है, within the same PAN, having different registrations, in that case, invoice can be issued at the end of the quarter. Only in case of supply made between the distinct person. This liberty has been given. Let us read once. Further, banking company, insurance company, NBFC, telecom, or other notified classes for supply made between distinct person may issue an invoice before में तो कभी कोई दिक्कत है ही नहीं. आप 6 महीना बाद सप्लाई करना है, आप इनवॉइस आज इश्यू कर दीजिए, डिपार्टमेंट विल नॉट से एनीथिंग. बट ऑब्वियसली इट इज नॉट प्रूडेंट टू डू सो, बिकॉज हम लोग जितना जल्दी टैक्स इनवॉइस इश्यू करेंगे, हमारी उतनी जल्दी टैक्स लायबिलिटी क्रिएट हो जाएगी. May issue tax invoice before or at the time of recording in the books of the supplier, or before the expiry of the quarter during which the supply is being made. तो क्वार्टर एंड में हम लोग इनवॉइस इश्यू कर सकते हैं. सो दिस इज द वेरी बेसिक प्रोविजन ऑफ टैक्स इनवॉइस. एकदम बेसिक, आगे और कई सारी पॉइंट्स है, बट सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट और सबसे ज्यादा यूज होने वाला प्रोविजन यही है. ठीक है, आई एम गिविंग यू 1 मिनट टाइम. एक बार आप इसको रीड कर लीजिए. इन केस ऑफ सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स ऑल्सो and in case of supply of services also. Just read at your own pace. While reading, if anyone have the query, they can put it on the chat box. Okay. Peculiar cases. This is the general case that we discuss now. अब हम लोग अलग अलग कुछ एक्सेप्शनल, अलग अलग डिफरेंट फीचर्स वाले केसेस देखेंगे. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, इन केस ऑफ कंटिन्यूअस सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स. नाउ व्हाट हैपन इन केस ऑफ कंटिन्यूअस सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स? वी डोंट नो कि कितना सप्लाई एग्जैक्टली हो रहा है अभी. लाइक this concept applies where I have a contract with the recipient that उसको जब जब जरूरत पड़ेगी I will deliver the goods, and we have agreed that at a regular interval, say for example at the month end, what we'll do, we will make a statement in which all the details will be there of supply of goods. Then on the basis of that statement, invoice will be prepared. Obviously, it is not possible also to make invoice on daily basis because there is a continuous supply of goods. because in many cases what happens, there is a contract, भाई वेंडर को बोल दिया अभी तुम 10 भेज दो, अभी 20 यूनिट भेज दो, इस तरह से कॉन्ट्रैक्ट किया हुआ है, तो एट द एंड व्हेन द फाइनल स्टेटमेंट विल बी गिवन by the supplier, at that time invoice has to be prepared. Again, here also the same language is there. Before that, definitely you can prepare the invoice, but in many cases it won't be possible to make the invoice before that, because we will not have the full quantitative details. So at the end of a period, when we'll receive the statement of accounts where the payment will also be involved, at that time invoice has to be prepared. I hope this point is clear. I give you one example. Like in offices, what happens? The vendor gives the water cans, or you can say dispenser. So on daily basis, on an average, he gives 4 dispenser, but it can be more than 4 also. It can be less than 4 also, depending on the consumption of the previous day. So on daily basis, what happens? He comes and see the stock, what is the stock line, and on that basis, he delivers the quantity and note it down. And what happens at the month end? Then he gives the statement, yes, on day 1, I supplied this much, day 2, itna, day 3, itna, day 4, itna, and total is this much. He gives the statement, and with that statement, the invoice has to be issued. This is what written in this particular provision. Let us read once. In case of continuous supply of goods where successive statement of accounts or payments are involved, मतलब जब गुड्स सप्लाई कर रहे हो उसके बाद क्या होगा, एक स्टेटमेंट ऑफ अकाउंट्स इन्वॉल्व होगा या फिर बाद में पेमेंट इन्वॉल्व होगा. It should be issued before or at the time of each such statement issued or payment received. मतलब जब जब पेमेंट रिसीव होगा, जब जब आप स्टेटमेंट इशू करेंगे, तब आपको इनवॉइस इशू करना है. नाउ देयर माइट बी वन क्वेश्चन कि सर अगर स्टेट पेमेंट अभी मिलानी है, स्टेटमेंट इशू कर दिए, डेफिनेटली यू हैव टू इशू द इनवॉइस. आपने स्टेटमेंट इशू नहीं किया लेकिन पेमेंट आ गया, देन ऑल्सो यू हैव टू इशू द इनवॉइस. मतलब जो भी जल्दी होगा उसके बेसिस पे आपको क्या करना होगा, इनवॉइस इशू करना होगा इन केस ऑफ कंटिन्यूअस सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स. आई होप दिस पॉइंट इज क्लियर. फाइन. नाउ नेक्स्ट, in case of continuous supply of services. Okay. So in case of continuous supply of services, there can be situation where the due date is mentioned in the contract. Like say for example, as I discussed, a software has been purchased and the billing will be done on the basis of uses. Okay. Now, there it has been mentioned that after every quarter, we will do the settlement and invoicing. So due date is every quarter. So in that case, invoice will be issued on the due date, or again, I'll say before that. Before में तो कोई दिक्कत है ही. Okay. Now say, इन वो जो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट था उसमें कोई ड्यू डेट मेंशन नहीं थी. तो अगर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में ड्यू डेट मेंशन नहीं है, इन दैट केस व्हेन यू रिसीव द पेमेंट, जब आप पेमेंट रिसीव कर लेंगे तब आपको क्या करना है, इनवॉइस इशू करना है. व्हेन यू रिसीव द पेमेंट. ओके. सो व्हाट इज द सिचुएशन ओवर हियर कि वेयर द ड्यू डेट ऑफ पेमेंट अगर असर्टेंड है तब तो फिर कोई दिक्कत ही नहीं ड्यू डेट के दिन. ठीक है. अगर असर्टेंड नहीं हो रहा है तब इन दैट केस क्या करेंगे, जब आपको पेमेंट रिसीव हो रहा है, एट दैट टाइम विल रेज द इनवॉइस. फाइन. नाउ if payment at times what happens in the contract only, it is mentioned that yes, you will get the payment when this event will be completed. If this work will be completed, then you will get the payment. So in that case, when the event will be completed, at that time, we will issue the invoice. Again, before that, we can always issue the invoice. Okay. So to conclude, in case of continuous supply of services, what will happen? In case due date is ascertainable, we will make the invoice on due date. If due date is not ascertainable, then when the payment is received, we'll make the invoice on that day. And in other case, if the contract is such that payment is linked with the particular event, कोई event से related payment linked होगा. Like you can take the example in case of software only. कि in software, अगर कोई एक class sale होती है, तो in that case, it is the responsibility of software provider that he'll make all the technical solution, whatever the student is asking. So in that case, once everything is done, at that time, invoice can be raised. So it will depend on the event on the basis of which payment will be received. कि भाई एक लाइसेंस बिक गया और उस लाइसेंस का सारा फॉर्मेलिटीज भी पूरा हो गया, हमने कस्टमर को ऑनबोर्ड भी कर दिया, सब चीज काम कंप्लीट होने के बाद supplier can raise the invoice. Okay, so this is in case of continuous supply of services. Let us read the provision once. In case of continuous supply of services, two scenario. Number one, where the due date of payment is ascertainable. If due date of the payment is ascertainable from the contract, the invoice shall be issued on or before the due date of payment. Everywhere you will find before. या तो due date के दिन या फिर उसके पहले, before that we can raise the invoice. If due date of payment is not ascertainable, अगर due date ascertain नहीं कर पा रहे, then the invoice shall be issued before or at the time when supplier of service receives the payment. जब payment receive होगा, उसके पहले we are supposed to issue the invoice. Okay. इसमें where the payment is linked to completion of an event, कोई event से relate किया हुआ है कि जब वो event complete होगा उसके बाद payment मिलेगा, then in that case invoice shall be issued on or before the date of completion of that event. When that event will be completed on that date or before that, invoice has to be issued. So this is the case of continuous supply of services. Okay, you can see once. First see this continuous supply of goods and then continuous supply of services. So we can move on to the next point. Someone is asking, okay, actually I missed all the questions. My screen was hidden. Now I can see. Okay. Someone is asking, what is the successive statement? Like I took the example of delivery of water dispenser or can. So on daily basis, some containers are being delivered. And after that, on a periodic basis, that can be month end. At the end of the month, a statement is being given which contains all the details of deliveries made during the period. That is the successive statement. Okay. Someone is asking, sir, is FOB same as X factory? Yes. And one FOB is that free on board, that is for the import case. That is different. So now we are moving on to the next point. So someone has asked one quarter point, not understand. That is in the case of financial institutions and banking company. Say, for example, SDFC Bank is in West Bengal also, is in Maharashtra also. There is some supply of service between these two states among the bank. So for these services, they can issue the invoice in a consolidated way at the end of the quarter. मतलब जनवरी फरवरी मार्च की सारी सर्विसेज का इनवॉइस एक बार में क्वार्टर एंड में वो लोग रेस कर देंगे, माने ऑन डेली बेसिस रेस करने की दरकार नहीं. ओके, यस, free on board, factory on board. Now let us come to the next point. There is a concept of sale of goods on approval or for return basis. What is this? We are sending some goods to a prospective customer. He will check the goods. If he is satisfied, he will buy. Otherwise, he will return those goods. I think you must have studied this in Sales of Good Act also. Okay. So in this case, when the invoice is to be issued, we have removed some goods, we have moved the goods to a recipient who will first see the goods, whether it is as per his specification or not, and accordingly he will take the decision. Okay. So what the law says, when we are moving these goods, आप उस वक्त भी इनवॉइस बना सकते हैं, लेकिन आप तो श्योर ही नहीं है ना कि भाई वो खरीदेगा कि नहीं. ठीक है. तो when recipient gives the consent, yes, these goods are as per my except my specification, then he will say okay. And when the recipient says okay, he agrees for the delivery, it means अब वो क्या हो गया, सप्लाई हो गया. ओके. और जब सप्लाई हो गया, then definitely we have to raise the invoice. Okay. So first scenario क्या हुआ, रेसिपिएंट ने गुड्स देखा और उसने ओके कर दिया और गुड्स रख लिया. तो जब उसने ओके कर दिया, इट मींस क्या हो गया, उस वक्त सप्लाई हो गया. और अगर सप्लाई हो गया तो इन दैट केस वी विल रेज द इनवॉइस. प्रॉब्लम इज कि हमने गुड्स सेंड कर दिया, बट द रेसिपिएंट इज नॉट सेइंग एनीथिंग. इन दिस केस law says we can't wait for indefinite period, so there is a timeline given of 6 months. अगर 6 months में वो रिटर्न नहीं आता है वापस, then in that case it will be deemed that the goods has been supplied and invoice has to be issued. Okay. मतलब whenever we are sending any goods on approval basis, if the recipient gives the consent before 6 months, in that case invoice has to be issued the date on which consent has been given. If no consent is given and goods are not returned back, then after 6 months it will be deemed कि supply हो गया वो, and you have to raise the invoice. You have to raise the invoice means you have to pay the taxes. आपको taxes pay करना हो. I hope this point is clear. Yes, सेल्स ऑफ गुड एक्ट में भी इस तरह से था कि भाई अगर कस्टमर एग्री करता है तो डेफिनेटली वो गुड्स उसका हो गया, सेल कंप्लीट हो गया। सेकेंड पॉइंट वहां पे थी कि अगर कस्टमर उस गुड्स के संग कुछ एक्टिविटी या उस गुड्स के संग कुछ भी कोई एक्ट कर लेता है, then also it will be deemed that sale has been taken place. तो in GST law what is being done कि 6 months time period is given. अगर within 6 months वो कुछ भी नहीं बोलता, it will be deemed कि उसने उस पर एक्ट कर लिया और वो सप्लाई कंप्लीट हो गई, and supplier have to issue the invoice. Let me clear you one thing. It is no way related to actual sale हुआ कि नहीं। हो सकता है actual sale नहीं हुआ, हो सकता है बाद में गुड्स रिटर्न आ जाए, but at this point of time it will be deemed as supply and supplier have to issue the invoice. Supplier को invoice issue करना हो। Okay, let us read this once. Where the goods being sent or taken on approval for sale or return are removed before the supply takes place. भाई पहले सप्लाई नहीं हुआ। इन जीएसटी लॉ सप्लाई का मतलब एकदम सिंपल, अभी आप समझो सेल, पर सेल नहीं हुआ, खाली गुड्स मूव हुआ अभी। द इनवॉइस शैल बी इशूड बिफोर और एट द टाइम ऑफ सप्लाई और 6 months फ्रॉम द डेट ऑफ रिमूवल विच एवर इज अर्लियर। जो भी अर्लियर होगा उसमें हम लोग को क्या करना है, इनवॉइस इशू करना है। आई होप दिस पॉइंट इज क्लियर। मतलब मैक्सिमम 6 महीने के अंदर तो इनवॉइस इशू करना ही होगा। ओके, यू रीड दिस पॉइंट वंस।
लंच करके
Okay, so this is the concept of sales on return on approval basis. There is one question. Someone is asking, sir, if goods are returned back on 7th month, it means after 6 months, then will credit note be issued by the supplier to reduce the liability? Look, there can be two possible cases in this. This is a good question. भाई इनका कहना 6 महीना के बाद रिटर्न आ गया, तो भाई आपको 6 महीना के अंदर में तो आपने इनवॉइस इशू कर दिया होगा, और फिर जब गुड्स रिटर्न आ गया देन डेफिनेटली यू हैव टू इशू अ क्रेडिट नोट, नहीं तो आपकी लायबिलिटी बढ़ जाएगी। मैं दूसरा समझाता, एक और क्वेश्चन इसमें बन सकता है। समवन कैन ऑल्सो आस्क कि हमने 6 महीना के बाद इनवॉइस बना दिया, बट से फॉर एग्जांपल आफ्टर 8 months कस्टमर ने उसको एक्सेप्ट कर लिया, तब क्या होगा? तो भाई अगर मैंने जो इनिशियली इनवॉइस बनाया था वो उसी कस्टमर के नाम पे बनाया था, तब तो कोई दिक्कत नहीं है अगर वो आफ्टर 8 months एक्सेप्ट कर लेता है, बिकॉज एज वी डिस्कस्ड अर्लियर जीएसटी लॉ सेज कि हमको इनवॉइस सप्लाई के पहले बनाना है। तो ठीक है, वो 8 महीना बाद एक्सेप्ट कर रहा है, बट हमने इनवॉइस पहले बना दिया, कोई दिक्कत नहीं। सिचुएशन विल बी डिफरेंट इफ 6 महीना बीत गया, वापस गुड्स नहीं आया, बट वो गुड्स कोई दूसरा जिसके पास भेजा था मैंने, या कोई और उसको एक्सेप्ट करता है, या मान लो मैंने गुड्स सेल ऑन अप्रूवल के लिए भेजा, वहां पे 4 लोग थे, कोई भी रिसीव कर सकता। तो इन दैट केस अगर मैंने किसी पर्टिकुलर पर्सन के नाम पे पहले इनवॉइस बनाया तो पहले उसका क्रेडिट नोट करेंगे और फिर उसके बाद एक नया इनवॉइस बनाएंगे जो एक्चुअल नए कस्टमर ने गुड्स के लिए अग्री किया, खरीदा है, उसके ऊपर हम लोग एक इनवॉइस बनाते हैं। ओके, someone is asking if goods returned before 6 months then invoice will not be issued. No, in that case invoice will not be issued. At that time concept of delivery challan is there, we'll discuss this later on. वो वाला concept use होगा, we have to issue delivery challan, not the invoice. Okay, so now let us move to the next point. In case of supply of service, there is a possibility, say for example द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट वाज फॉर 6 months, बट जो हमने सॉफ्टवेयर खरीदा उसी का एग्जांपल ले लेते हैं। कॉन्ट्रैक्ट 6 महीने का था, बट आफ्टर 4 months ही हमने क्या किया, टर्मिनेट कर दिया। हो ही सकता है कोई कारण से कॉन्ट्रैक्ट क्या हो गया, सीज हो गया। इन दैट केस व्हाट विल हैपन, वेरी सिंपल लॉजिक, अगर 4 months में सीज हो गया तो डेफिनेटली जिस दिन सीज हुआ, ठीक है ना, उस दिन तक का जो भी सप्लाई हुआ उसका इनवॉइस हम लोग ऑन द डेट ऑफ सीजन बना लेंगे। जब वो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट सीज हो रहा है उस वक्त हम लोग इनवॉइस करते हैं। वी विल इशू द इनवॉइस when the contract has ceased. Okay, so this is the point where contract is ceased before the tenure. So in that case, when the contract is ceased, we'll calculate the value of services and accordingly the invoice will be raised. Okay, let me read this for you. Where supply of service ceases under a contract before completion of the supply, पूरा काम कंप्लीट नहीं हुआ, पहले सीज कर दिए। The invoice shall be issued at the time when supply ceases, and such invoice shall be issued to the extent of supply made before the season. जितना सप्लाई हुआ, जो भी अग्री होगा, जो भी अमाउंट अग्री होगा, उसके बेसिस पे क्या करेंगे, हम लोग इनवॉइस बनाते हैं। आई होप दिस पॉइंट इज क्लियर। एक बार रीड कर लीजिए। Someone is asking date of payment and receipt of payment अगर different हुआ तो, look, as on today everything is being done on online basis, so hardly there will be any difference. Still, if we assume there is a difference between date of payment and date of receipt, then what is written in the law, on that basis we have to go कि जहां पे पेमेंट बोला पेमेंट और जहां पे रिसिप्ट बोला रिसिप्ट, उसके बेसिस पे हम लोग को जाना। क्योंकि हम लोग इनवॉइस इशू करने की बात कर रहे हैं और सप्लायर की बात कर रहे हैं, तो सप्लायर को तो पेमेंट रिसीव से ही मतलब होगा, तो वो जब पेमेंट रिसीव करेगा उसके बेसिस पे हम लोग को डेट आइडेंटिफाई करना होगा। सो यू कैन से रिसीव ऑफ पेमेंट इन केस ऑफ सप्लायर। सर इनवॉइस इशूड एंड आफ्टर कस्टमर रिटर्न द गुड्स, देन व्हाट? इनवॉइस इशू कर दिए, कस्टमर रिटर्न कर दिया, देन विल डू द क्रेडिट नोट, हम लोग क्रेडिट नोट करेंगे इसको। Fine. So we can move further. So can you imagine a situation you are going in a grocery store, वहां पे on a regular basis items are being sold to different customers. Someone is coming buying 100 rupees ka item, someone is 150, someone is buying 50. So in that case, if they prepare the invoice, tax invoice, it will be very difficult for them. क्योंकि tax invoice जब आप बनाएंगे, there are certain mandatory contents we'll discuss later on that has to be written on the tax invoice. So it will be very difficult to make tax invoice in such cases. So the law has given some relief. What is the relief given? Law says if value of goods is less than 100, or per se services also, if value of goods or services is less than 200, sorry मैंने शायद पहले 100 बोल दिया था, if it is less than 200, तब आप उस वक्त इनवॉइस इशू नहीं करके आप एट द एंड ऑफ द डे में पूरा हिसाब कर लो, you do all the calculations that during the whole day how much sale is being done, and on that basis you can issue one consolidated invoice. आप केवल एक इनवॉइस इशू कर सकते हैं in that case. I am again repeating, if you are supplying goods which of the value less than rupees 200, In that case, you are not required to issue tax invoice for each sale. You can make tax invoice consolidated at the end of the day. मान लो 500 कस्टमर आए, तो 500 कस्टमर का मिला के आप एट द एंड ऑफ द डे में आप एक इनवॉइस इशू कर सकते हैं. ओके, बट नाउ हियर द क्वेश्चन कम्स कि सर इफ रेसिपिएंट इज रजिस्टर्ड, तब वो हो सकता है नहीं मानेगा कि उसको तो इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट मिलेगी. एब्सोल्युटली करेक्ट. दिस इज ओनली when the recipient is unregistered or recipient is not asking for any invoice. मैं recipient बोला मेरे को invoice नहीं चाहिए. अभी 150 rupees के invoice में how much credit will you get? It's a very small amount. So recipient is not asking for invoice. If recipient is not asking for invoice, or if recipient is unregistered, then the supplier is at liberty that he can raise a consolidated invoice at the end of the day. At the end of the day सबका टोटल करके एक इनवॉइस बना सकता है. अब मान लीजिए ऐसा हुआ कि 200 कस्टमर्स थे पूरे दिन में, उसमें out of those 200 customers in a day, say for example we can say total 200 customers थे, उसमें से 150 unregistered, 50 registered, and but out of this 50 only 10 persons are demanding the invoice. बाकी 40 बोले हमको इनवॉइस नहीं चाहिए. So this provision will not be applicable for this 10%, those who are asking invoice. Those who are asking invoice, for them you have to make an invoice by putting their GST number. ठीक है ना? तो in that case आपको आप इन 10 के ऊपर वो अप्लाई नहीं होगा, लेकिन बाकी 190 पे 190 का आप क्या कर सकते हैं, 190 का एक संग आप क्या कर पाएंगे, इनवॉइस रेस कर पाएंगे कंसोलिडेटेड. लेकिन एक बात और ध्यान रखिएगा, अनरजिस्टर्ड में भी कई लोग होते नहीं हमको तो इनवॉइस चाहिए. तो अगर अनरजिस्टर्ड में भी इनवॉइस चाहिए, तब इन दैट केस यू हैव टू मेक अ सेपरेट इनवॉइस, बिकॉज इट्स द राइट ऑफ द रेसिपिएंट टू गेट द इनवॉइस. ओके, और अगर वो रजिस्टर्ड है और अगर उसको इनवॉइस नहीं चाहिए, तो आप बात समझो, इफ एनी पर्सन इज रजिस्टर्ड एंड ही डोंट नीड द इनवॉइस, then definitely he will not give his GST number. Or if he is not giving you the GST registration number, for you it is as good as unregistered. Please note this point very carefully. Say for example, I am a registered person, I go to your shop, buy goods worth rupees 150. I am a registered person, I am not giving you my GST number. How will you come to know that I am a registered person? So if I am not giving my GST number, because I don't need any invoice, I am not giving my GST number. So if I am not giving any invoice, for you I am as good as unregistered person. But if I say no, I need the invoice of my rupees 150, then I will give the GST number, and then you have to make a separate invoice. On the other hand, say if I am unregistered person, I went to your shop and bought goods worth rupees 150, but I am insisting, no, I need the invoice. If I am insisting that I need the invoice, you have to give a separate invoice. Then there is no choice that you will say, no, I will make the consolidated invoice. I won't give you any invoice right now. तब वो काम नहीं चलेगा. Okay. So I conclude the things. So what is the conclusion? Number one, if the value of goods or services is less than rupees 200, then you ask the customer whether you need the invoice or not. If you don't need any invoice, you make a consolidated invoice for all the customers at the end of the day. Just you have to leave out those customers हु इंसिस्ट फॉर इनवॉइस, भाई उनको तो आपको इनवॉइस देना होगा, अदरवाइज आप कंसोलिडेटेड बना सकते हैं। तो भाई इस तरह की ग्रोसरी शॉप वगैरह में हो सकता है लोग इनवॉइस बहुत लोग नहीं मांगते हैं, तो इन दैट केस यू विल हैव द लिबर्टी। आई होप दिस पॉइंट इज क्लियर। सेकेंड, in case of banking, insurance, and financial institution, a liberty is given irrespective of the amount. They can issue the invoice at the end of the month. तो लोग मंथ के एंड में क्या कर सकते हैं, इनवॉइस इशू कर सकते हैं। ओके, दे कैन इशू द इनवॉइस एट द एंड ऑफ द मंथ फॉर बैंकिंग कंपनी, इंश्योरेंस। इन एनी केस, बैंकिंग कंपनी, इंश्योरेंस कंपनी, दे आर प्रोवाइडिंग सर्विसेज, और सर्विसेज के केस में तो ऐसे भी क्या होता है कि आप एट द एंड ऑफ द आफ्टर 30 एंड 45 डेज आप इनवॉइस बना सकते हो। तो यहां पे लिबर्टी दी गई है कि बहुत सारे ट्रांजेक्शन, आई गिव यू वेरी सिंपल एग्जांपल, बैंक चार्जेस, लॉट्स ऑफ बैंक चार्जेस इज बीइंग लेविड बाय द बैंक, छोटे छोटे करके बहुत सारे बैंक चार्जेस होते हैं, तो सबका अलग अलग इनवॉइस नहीं होगा। एट द एंड ऑफ द मंथ देयर विल बी वन कंसोलिडेटेड इनवॉइस। क्या होगा, एक कंसोलिडेटेड इनवॉइस होगा एट द एंड ऑफ द मंथ। ओके, इन केस ऑफ बैंकिंग एंड इंश्योरेंस कंपनी। One more point. If you go to watch movie at the multiplex cinema halls, in that case, even if invoice is less than rupees 200, whether you demand for the invoice or not, they have to issue the invoice. Multiplex के केस में क्या है, ये एक्सेप्शन है, इनवॉइस क्या करना होगा, इशू करना ही होगा, even if the value of supply is less than 200 रुपीज, तब भी इशू करना हो। ओके, तो इस पूरे कॉन्सेप्ट में हम लोगों ने तीन चीज डिस्कस की। नंबर वन, इफ वैल्यू इज लेस देन 200, कंसोलिडेटेड इनवॉइस एट द एंड ऑफ द डे। बैंकिंग इंश्योरेंस कंपनी है, कंसोलिडेटेड इनवॉइस इररिस्पेक्टिव ऑफ द वैल्यू एट द एंड ऑफ द मंथ। सिनेमा हॉल है, multiplex है, no limit, they have to issue invoice for every transaction, whether recipient demands the invoice or not, doesn't matter, उनको सब केस में invoice issue करना होगा। Okay, let us read this once, then I'll take up the query which is in the chat box. If the value of goods or services is less than 200, टैक्स इनवॉइस में नॉट बी इश्यूड, टैक्स इनवॉइस की दरकार नहीं है। वेयर रेसिपिएंट इज अनरजिस्टर्ड एंड डज नॉट रिक्वायर द इनवॉइस, भाई रेसिपिएंट अनरजिस्टर्ड है और बोल रहा हमको इनवॉइस नहीं चाहिए। मैं फिर बोल रहा हूं, अगर रेसिपिएंट रजिस्टर्ड है लेकिन वो अगर नंबर नहीं देगा तो आपके लिए वो क्या है, अनरजिस्टर्ड है। वो अगर इनवॉइस नहीं मांग रहा है तो टैक्स इनवॉइस इश्यू नहीं करना है। फिर a consolidated tax invoice for such supply shall be issued at the close of each day in respect of all such supplies, banking, insurance, financial institution for, sorry, I missed it. A consolidated tax invoice for such supply shall be issued at the close of each day in respect of such supply. यहां पे खत्म हो गया, ठीक है। At the end of the day एक invoice। फिर बैंकिंग, इंश्योरेंस, फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन में फॉर सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विसेज इशू consolidated tax invoice irrespective of the value of such service at the end of each month. यहां पे रजिस्टर्ड भी होगा ना रेसिपिएंट, इन दैट केस ऑल्सो एट द एंड ऑफ द मंथ में वो लोग क्या करेंगे, इनवॉइस इशू करेंगे। आई होप this point is very much clear to everyone. एक बात और, however, the above facility is not available to the supplier engaged in making supply of services by way of admission to cinematograph films in multiplex screens. Multiplex में अगर कोई सिनेमा हॉल है, उसके टिकट्स है, we have to issue the invoice separate. This is a very important point. इस पे बिल्कुल क्वेश्चन आ सकते हैं एग्जाम में। Okay. You read it once at your own. एक बार आप अपने आप से इसको रीड कीजिए. So any question in this? Let me read. There is one question. A unregistered person demand tax invoice, but in that case, customer do not have the GST number. So, sir, without GST number can issue invoice? Yes, you have to. What is written? Just read over here. ये वाली line पढ़िए. Is an unregistered person and does not require such invoice. अगर वो मना करेगा इनवॉइस नहीं चाहिए तभी आप अवॉइड कर सकते हैं. अगर वो इनवॉइस मांग रहा है, even if he is not registered, you have to issue the invoice. So cinema, banking, insurance, financial institution. Sorry, what is the third case? Financial institution. Financial institution include NBFC, correct? Financial institution will include NBFC. Fine. I hope this is clear. Check. So we move further. Someone is asking, yes, take it a Q5. What is this? I'm not getting exactly what are you saying. So let's move further. Take it a question. I'm not getting exactly. Okay, so we are moving further. Now, there is a concept of self-invoicing. Do you know why tax invoice is important? For one more very important reason, you must have read in section 16 of input tax credit. Without tax invoice, you will not be allowed to take the credit. If you can recall, under section 16, conditions are mentioned. When can you take the credit? Okay. And one of the very important condition for taking the credit is you should possess a tax invoice. आपके पास क्या होना चाहिए? Tax invoice होना चाहिए. Okay. Now, you might have studied RCM. Please, someone in chat box, let me clear. Have you all done the RCM, reverse charge mechanism? Fine. So in case of RCM, yes, I got it. In case of RCM, what happens? Recipient of goods or service pays the tax. Usually what happens, suppose if I'm buying any goods from a supplier for rupees 100 and say 18 rupees is tax on that. So what I will do as a recipient of service, I will pay 113 to my supplier, और वो 118 में supplier will keep 100 rupees with himself and 18 rupees he will deposit to the government as taxes. Okay, you can see over here, A is the seller and B is the recipient. I paid to him rupees 100 plus 18 tax. Now what A will do, A will keep rupees 100 with itself and will pay 18 rupees to government as taxes. और इस 18 rupees का क्रेडिट क्या होगा, बी को मिल जाएगा. Hope this is clear. In RCM, what happens? What recipient will do? Recipient will pay only rupees 100 to A, and 18 rupees recipient will pay directly to the government. GST department में direct pay कर देगा और credit ले लेगा. Ultimately, things are getting same. In forward charge, what happens? B is paying taxes to A is paying to the government. In case of RCM, B is paying himself to the government. Right? But now the problem is, B, when received the goods from A or services from A must have given the invoice to B, but that invoice is not the tax invoice, or we can say uske upar tax element to hoga nahi, because tax is being paid directly by B to the government. Tax directly B pay kar raha hai. So how will B get the credit? Because B don't have any tax invoice. Here comes the concept of self-invoicing. So in this case, what will happen? B have to raise invoice on himself, self-invoice, because the tax of 18 rupees, B is directly paying to the government. So what will B do? B will issue a self-invoice and will pay 18 rupees tax to the government and will take the credit of rupees 18. But for taking the credit, B needs invoice, and that is the self-invoice. That's why self-invoice has to be issued by the recipient itself for availing the credit. Okay, so this concept will apply only in case of RCM, reverse charge mechanism वाले केस में ये कॉन्सेप्ट अप्लाई होगा. Okay, let us read once. In case of reverse charge under section 9, subsection 3 or 4, recipient shall issue self-invoice, recipient, where the supplier is unregistered. A consolidated invoice may be issued at the end of the month for supplies covered under 9.4. 9.4 की अगर सप्लाई है अनरजिस्टर्ड वाली, तो इन दैट केस क्या करेंगे, एट द एंड ऑफ द मंथ में, बहुत सारी आपने सप्लाईज रिसीव की होगी ना, एट द एंड ऑफ द मंथ में I will make only one self-invoice that will serve the purpose. वो purpose serve कर देगा. Is it okay? So this is the concept of self-invoice. Okay. So this situation will arise. This situation will arise only in case of reverse charge mechanism services. वहीं पे केवल ये concept apply होगा. I hope this is clear. If there is any question, let me take those questions. Someone is asking bill of supply will be given. I will be discussing this in the second half. Then why he deposit tax to the government in case of hardship. Someone is saying कि if we pay the tax to the government and then we are taking the credit, what is the use of paying and taking the credit? Look, credit is not eligible in all the cases. There are certain cases where credit is not eligible at all. There are certain cases where credit is available proportionately. So there are different cases. So first you pay the tax. Now whether you can take the credit or not, that will depend on the rules prescribed in ITC chapter. Okay, so these are the two different things. पहले आपको पूरा tax pay करना है. Whether ITC will be available or not, that will depend on the rules and sections, what is said in the chapter ITC. If recipient is unregistered, then what to do? Very good question. Someone is asking recipient agar unregistered, then what to do? Let me clear you one thing. There are two kinds of RCM. One is compulsory RCM. One is RCM only applicable for registered person. If RCM is only applicable for registered person, then in that case, उसको RCM नहीं पे करना पड़ेगा अगर वो registered नहीं है तो. और अगर compulsory RCM है, then in that case, the unregistered person have to take the registration to pay this RCM. ये RCM पे करने के लिए उसे registration लेना पड़ेगा. Hope this point is clear. Okay. Yes, he can take temporary registration अगर उसको लग रहा है फिर से सर्विस नहीं रहेगी तो. Fine. So this is the concept of self-invoicing. I hope yahan tak clear hai. Let us take 10 minutes break. After that again we'll join. Okay. तो एक 10 minutes का break लेते हैं उसके बाद वापस हम लोग check. Is it okay? Someone comment. Yeah. I think we can start. Let me take the queries. There are some queries. Someone are asking for the compulsory RCM. Look, notification number 11 of Central Tax Rate 2017 gives the list of items where compulsory RCM is applicable. Where RCM is applicable. Like in case of, you can say GTA services, goods transport agency services. If you receive GTA services, then you have to compulsorily pay the RCM. Similarly, in case of legal charges, you have to compulsorily pay the RCM. There are lots of other services also, like in case of real estate also, there is the concept of RCM in case of development rights. Okay, and there are lots of other cases where you have to pay the compulsory RCM. You can read the notification 11. There you'll get the complete list of compulsory RCM. Can we start? Yes. So we can start. Yeah. So till now, what we have discussed, what is tax invoice? Timing of the tax invoice. First case was the normal case in case of goods, before the removal of goods or at the time of removal of goods, and where the good does not involve movement at the time when the goods are ready for the delivery. In case of services, within 30 days of the provision of services, and any time you can issue before that. Banking company say the days are 45. Okay, fine. उसके बाद in case of continuous supply of goods and continuous supply of services, we discussed. In case of continuous supply of goods, when we receive the statement of account at that time or before that, and in case of continuous supply of services, invoice can be issued if due date is mentioned on that day. If due date is not mentioned, the date when the payment is received, and if in the contract, if any event is specified, then on happening or completion of that event, invoice has to be issued. Next point was sale on return on approval. If goods are not called back within 6 months, then it will be deemed as supply and you have to issue the invoice. And one case was that when the contract ceases in the middle, then the invoice has to be issued when the contract ceases, the supply terminates. तो वहां तक का जितना भी supply हुआ, on that basis, invoice has to be issued. Next, we discuss the consolidated invoice. Very important from examination point of view. If the value is less than 200 and recipient does not insist for the invoice, you can omit the tax invoice, and at the end of the day, consolidated invoice can be issued. In case of banking insurance, this liberty is given for the whole month, irrespective of the amount. Amount अगर 200 से ज्यादा है तो भी at the end of the month आपको एक consolidated invoice issue करना है. But again, in case of cinema hall multiplexes, there is no such relaxation. Even if than 200, you have to issue invoice. So we have done technical. Someone is saying, sir, could you show the real invoice? Definitely we'll see the real invoice in the next class. Okay, let's see. Particulars of a tax invoice. This is covered in section 31. Read with rule 46. Let me clear you one thing. GST law nowhere says about any format of the tax invoice. कोई format given नहीं. You can make any format. Then what is given? GST law gives the mandatory requirement mandatory content that should be there in the tax invoice. टैक्स इनवॉइस में कुछ मैंडेटरी कंटेंट है वो होने ही चाहिए. उसके अलावा फॉर्मेट कैसा भी हो, टैक्स आप यहां लिखिए, टोटल यहां लिखिए, टैक्स रेट यहां लिखिए, सप्लायर का नाम ऊपर लिखिए, कैसे भी लिखिए, डजंट मैटर एट ऑल. द ओनली यू हैव टू टेक केयर इज द मैंडेटरी कंटेंट. एंड विल सी नाउ द मैंडेटरी कंटेंट ऑफ एनी tax invoice. Okay, like you can see, without even reading, we can figure out some content. Very simple. Name, address, and GSTN of the supplier. Suppose I am the seller, supplier. So I have to write my name, address, my GST number. Okay. Name means trade name, and legal name also will be there with GST number. A very important point, you have to assign one number, unique number to every invoice. Okay. You have to assign unique number to every invoice. And very importantly, the invoice number should not be of more than 16 characters. Maximum 16 character का एक invoice हो सकता है. You can use alphanumeric, you can use special characters, dash, hyphen, front slash, backslash, anything you can use. But in total, everything should contain maximum 16 characters. Okay. There is one very important point in this regarding invoice number. Like what happens, suppose I am a company, there is a company which deals in 4 different varieties of product. So what company can do? Company can maintain 4 different series of invoice. Let me give you one example. There are 4 products, A, B, C, D. So what company can do is, for product A/1, A/2, one serial number is 1, 2, 3, 4 only, but they are using a prefix A. Similarly, for product B, they are using B. For product C, they are using C. It is allowed. Similarly, say we are in West Bengal, and in West Bengal, I am selling my product from 4 different locations. So I can use prefix on the basis of locations also. Like for location, 4 locations are, say for example, PQRS. So for one location, P oblique या dash 1, 2, 3, 4, मतलब prefix will be P. For location, Q prefix will be Q. In this way, we can use any number of series. It is allowed, but it should be justified. Like I gave the justification. First justification was I am making 4 different series for 4 different products. Second, 4 different locations के लिए I was making 4 different series. So in this way, there should be a proper justification. Then you can make different series for different products or different location. Okay. And this should be unique for one financial year. एक financial year के लिए एक ही चलेगा. मतलब प्रोडक्ट ए के लिए पहले आप क्या करते, ए 1, 2, 3, 4, फिर बाद में उसी में बी कर दी, नहीं. फिर प्रोडक्ट के लिए ए, तो इट शुड बी ए फॉर थ्रू आउट द ईयर. इज इट ओके? लाइक इस तरह से इनवॉइस नंबर तो ना आप देखे होंगे, A/1, A/2, A/3, इस तरह से. बहुत जल्द ईयर भी लिखते हैं इसके अंदर, 2007, 8, 8, 9. तो यू कैन यूज ऑल दिस, बट मैक्सिमम 16 डिजिट्स का होना चाहिए. ओके, चलिए. ये सीरीज फॉलो करते हैं. Yes, you have to follow the series. नहीं तो there is a logic behind this. If you don't maintain the series properly, जब मन में आया you insert new series, then there can be manipulation. The concept of series is just to avoid, just to stop the manipulation, just to curtail the manipulation. That's why this concept of series is there. You can't change the series in the middle without having proper justification. Okay. Examples for person. Examples for persons RCM compulsory registration required. I discussed the example. Legal charges, GTA services are the example. Okay. Chale. And with this, and as they are allowing the different series, you can control the data better. Someone has said this also. आपका डेटा पे भी कंट्रोल, आपको पता रहेगा भी ए सीरीज में इतना सेल हो रहा है, भी या क्वांटिटी वाइज एंड ऑल, यू कैन मेंटेन अ बेटर प्रॉपर कंट्रोल. चलिए, नाउ व्हाट आर द अदर थिंग्स. तो सबसे पहले नेम, एड्रेस, जीएसटी तो था ही. इनवॉइस नंबर, this is very important from examination point of view. On this only you can get a question. Next point is date of issue. Date of issue. Obvious बात है, in any invoice you will get this date of issue. If recipient is registered, then name, address, and GSTN or UIN. Do you know what is UIN? यूनिक आइडेंटिटी नंबर. ये जिनके पैन नहीं होते ना, एम्बेसीज वगैरह, वहां पे यूआईएन होता है. आपके लिए रेलेवेंट नहीं है. तो अगर रेसिपिएंट रजिस्टर्ड है तो उसका नाम, एड्रेस एंड जीएसटी नंबर यू हैव टू मेंशन. ओके, अदरवाइज ही वोंट बी एबल टू गेट द क्रेडिट. नेक्स्ट. नो, sorry. If recipient is unregistered, I'm discussing this, and value of supply is 50,000 or more, then you have to mention the name, address of the recipient and address of delivery along with the state and pin code. अगर 50,000 से ज्यादा का वैल्यू है, you have to mention all these details. But if value is less than 50,000, then no need. तब आप अनरजिस्टर्ड रेसिपिएंट में स्टिल आप मेंशन करना चाहो तो कर सकते हो, बट इट इज नॉट कंपल्सरी if value is less than 50,000. So this is also important from examination point of view. If value is more than 50,000 or more than 50,000, then you have to mention the complete name, address of the recipient and with pin code. Otherwise, not necessary. You can still mention, but not required. Okay. Next. OIDAR services. Have you heard about OIDAR services? Netflix वगैरह जो हम लोग देखते हैं ना, ठीक है, that comes under OIDAR services, ऑनलाइन डेटा रिट्रीवल सर्विसेज. ठीक है ना, ये जो है, लेट मी क्लियर यू, दीज आर द ऑनलाइन सर्विसेज. ओके, और इसमें ई कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर भी है, OIDAR भी है. तो यहां पे हम लोग को इनवॉइस जो बनाएंगे, कोई भी वैल्यू हो, you have to mention the name and address of the recipient with pin code. Irrespective of any value, you have to mention the name, address, and the recipient ka pin code. You have to mention that. Okay. Acha, one more thing before going further. Do you know why it is important to mention the pin code and the state? I have said earlier also, I am saying again here also. Why it is important? Someone please on chat box. Why it is so important to mention the state or the pin code? Someone is saying for CGST, IGST claim. Let me clear you. Look, PIN code is important because GST is the destination based tax. Look, someone is saying, we are talking this mainly for the unregistered person. Registered person का तो उसका तो ऐसे भी रहेगा ही. Unregistered person, it is important to mention because GST is the destination based tax on the basis of state. वो स्टेट को रेवेन्यू मिलेगा जहां पे फिर क्या हो रहा है, कंजम्पशन हो रहा है. दैट्स व्हाई इट्स इंपॉर्टेंट टू मेंशन द स्टेट. Fine. Let us read this point. Where any taxable services is supplied by or through e-commerce operator or by a supplier of OIDA services to a recipient who is unregistered. ठीक है, अगर recipient unregistered है उसके लिए irrespective of the value of such supply, tax invoice issued by the registered person shall contain the name, address of the recipient and name of the state, and the said address shall be deemed to be the address on record of the recipient. तो ये address on record माना जाए. पिन कोड और स्टेट हम लोग को चाहिए, और यहां पे लिखा है irrespective of value, कोई भी वैल्यू हो. अब यहां पे कोई बोल सकता है कि सर आपने पहले कहा था कि 200 से कम का कोई वैल्यू है, देयर इज नो नीड ऑफ इनवॉइस. Is everyone in? Because I think there was some technical glitch. Can you see the screen? Okay, right, I have come. Fine. You can see now. So what I was saying, in case of consolidated invoice provision that we were discussing, if value is less than 200, I said there is no need to issue any invoice. But now again I am saying here it is mentioned that irrespective of any value. See, so let me clear you. This is the specific provision. This will prevail over that. In case of e-commerce operator, in case of OIDA services, in these cases, you have to follow this provision. I mean to say, irrespective of the value of invoice, you have to issue the invoice. यहाँ पे वो consolidated form नहीं चलेगा जो हम लोग लास्ट प्रोविजन में डिस्कस किए थे. ठीक है, So in case of e-commerce operator and online information database access and retrieval services के case में, you have to issue the invoice. Okay. In fact, you must have noticed that whenever we do some online logins like Netflix or Hotstar, they take us the detail कि state में वो सारी detail वो लोग ले लेते हैं, irrespective of the amount. 49 rupees में भी login करते हैं, ठीक है, तो लेकिन they get all the details. So that is what mentioned over here कि आपको वो state code वगैरह सब कुछ, state pin code सब mention करना हो. I hope this point is clear. चलिए next. Someone was saying no sir, for किसके लिए no sir? अच्छा स्क्रीन के लिए होगा, fine. Let's move further. Next point that we need to mention is the HSN code of goods and services. I'll discuss in detail HSN code कैसे mention करना है. Description of goods and services. Definitely you have to mention description कि भाई goods और services का क्या description है, you have to mention that. Next, these are simple. Quantity in case of goods and unit or unique quantity code जो भी होगा वो आपको mention करना है. The parameter on the basis of which it will be measured. Total value of supply, definitely you have to mention कितना value का goods है. Taxable value of supply of goods or services are both taking into account discount or abatement if any. कोई अगर trade discount वगैरह वो उस वक्त अपने को minus करके show करना है. Rate of tax. सेंट्रल का रेट क्या है, स्टेट का रेट क्या है, इंटीग्रेटेड रेट टैक्स क्या है, यूनियन टेरिटरी अगर ड्यूटी का रेट क्या है, ठीक है. यू हैव टू मेंशन द रेट ऑफ टैक्स ऑल्सो. अमाउंट ऑफ टैक्स कितना आपने चार्ज किया, यहां पे रेट है, यहां पे अमाउंट है. यू विल सी एनी इनवॉइस, आपको वहां पे रेट भी मिलेगा और अमाउंट ऑफ टैक्स भी मिलेगा. Fine. Next, place of supply along with the name of state in case of supply in the course of interstate trade or commerce. Place of supply. I think you must have studied or you will be studying place of supply का एक अलग चैप्टर है GST Act में section 12 and section 13. So there you will study in detail the whole concept of place of supply. Okay. Then address of delivery, well, same is different from place of supply. In many cases, what happens, place of supply is different and address of delivery is different. Okay. Place of supply, to identify place of supply, there are certain rules in the GST, which is given in section 12 and section 13. But address of delivery means where the actual delivery will take place. And these two can be different. Can any one of you give the example where this will be different? Place of supply and address of delivery. भैया आप बता पाएंगे क्या कहां पे डिफरेंट होगा? Any example? Let me clear you. Bill to ship to, yes, someone give the correct answer. Bill to ship to is a very good example. What happens, suppose I am selling goods to Mr. A in Gujarat, but he had instructed to me to deliver these goods in Maharashtra to his customer. So what will I do? I will make my invoice to Mr. A in Gujarat. I will write place of supply Gujarat, but my address of delivery will be Maharashtra. So there is a possibility that place of supply and address of delivery are different. Okay. Whether the tax is payable on RCM basis. Say, for example, you are giving legal services, but you are registered in GST. So in that case, when you will issue the invoice, definitely you will not collect the tax because this service is under RCM. So recipient himself will pay the tax to the government. As a supplier of service, I will not collect the tax. Still, while preparing the invoice, I have to mention everything what I discussed, and I have to mention one line that this supply is subject to RCM. It means the tax on this will be paid by the recipient. Okay. Signature or digital signature. QR code. Okay, this is in case of e-invoicing. We'll discuss the e-invoicing later on. तो QR कोड उसके अंदर में आएगा. We'll discuss that separately. ठीक है. फाइन. तो आप देखेंगे इस सारे कंटेंट्स में कुछ कुछ चीज बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है that you should remember. What is that? Number one, this serial number, invoice number. This is very important. ठीक है. डेट है, अमाउंट, इसमें मिस्टेक नहीं होगी. यू हैव टू मेंशन, एवरीवन नोस. दिस वन इज इंपॉर्टेंट. सेकेंड, रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन, उसका तो आपको नेम, एड्रेस और जीएसटी नंबर मेंशन करना वो. थर्ड, दिस रूल 50,000 से ज्यादा या कम वाला. फोर्थ, ओइडर एंड ई कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर. ठीक है. फिफ्थ, एचएसएन कोड. डिस्क्रिप्शन ऑफ गुड्स इज वेरी सिंपल. यू हैव टू मेंशन, एवरीवन नोस. क्वांटिटी एवरीवन नोज, मेंशन वैल्यू मेंशन करेंगे. कहां तक हुआ था? 5 तक हुआ ना. 6, रेट ऑफ टैक्स सेपरेटली, अमाउंट ऑफ टैक्स सेपरेटली. इसमें मिस्टेक होता है. यू हैव टू मेंशन द रेट ऑल्सो, यू हैव टू मेंशन द अमाउंट ऑफ टैक्स ऑल्सो. ओके. फिर दिस इज 8 एंड दिस इज 9 एंड दिस इज 10. यहां पे आरसीएम के बेसिस पे आपको टैक्स पे करना.
सेक्शन आया है.
ओके. ओके. तो ये सारी चीजें मैंडेटरी, और ये नंबरिंग जो मैंने दिया आपको ये याद रखना होगा. बाकी चीजें कॉमन है, बहुत इजीली याद रह जाएंगी. नाउ लेट अस कम टू द एचएसएन कोड. ओके. हार्मोनाइज सिस्टम ऑफ नोमेनक्लेचर. Do you know these HSN codes are internationally accepted? ये इंटरनेशनल लेवल के HSN कोड है. Okay. So now, when to mention HSN code? How much digit we are supposed to mention? Because HSN code is up to 8 digits. Okay. तो अपने को कितना डिजिट HSN कोड मेंशन करें? So the board, on recommendation of the council, it will notify कि किसको HSN कोड मेंशन करना है, किसको नहीं करना, किस गुड्स में करना है, किसमें नहीं करना, और कितना डिजिट मेंशन करना है. ओके. तो ये नोटिफिकेशन के थ्रू वो लोग बताएंगे, एंड दे हैव इशूड द नोटिफिकेशन. वी विल डिस्कस दैट. एंड सेम दिस विल अप्लाई फॉर बिल ऑफ सप्लाई ऑल्सो. लेट मी डिस्कस यू इन वन लाइन व्हाट इज बिल ऑफ सप्लाई. लेटर ऑन विल डिस्कस इन डिटेल. As we discussed, the tax invoice is issued when there is supply of taxable goods or services. Similarly, bill of supply is issued when there is supply of exempt goods or services. जब आप exempt goods या service provide करेंगे, supply करेंगे, तब आप tax invoice तो issue कर नहीं सकते, क्योंकि tax invoice तो issue होगा only in case of taxable goods. So in case of exempted goods, you have to issue bill of supply. ठीक है. तो in case of bill of supply also, all the rules of HSN will apply as it is. So what are the rules? We'll see those rules now. अभी हम लोग देखेंगे क्या क्या rules है HSN के. Okay, let's see. This is the notification which is amended from time to time. ये क्या बोलता है? There are two categories. Your turnover is less than equal to 5 crore, or you can say turnover is up to 5 crores. In that case, B2B. B2B means business to business, matlab registered person to another registered person. From one registered person to another registered. Simply, if recipient provides its GST number, then it is B2B. In that case, you have to mention 4-digit HSN code. Okay. 4-digit, basically first 2 digits are for chapter. Second 2 digits are for heading. तो आपको 4-digit का HSN कोड प्रोवाइड करना है इन केस ऑफ B2B सप्लाईज. और अगर B2C सप्लाईज है तो इन दैट केस ऑप्शनल है. ठीक है ना, इट इज ऑप्शनल. आप चाहो तो मेंशन कर सकते. But if turnover, 80 means aggregate turnover. This is aggregate turnover. But if aggregate turnover is more than 5 crores, in that case, you have to mention 6-digit, 6-digit HSN code आपको mention करना हो. Okay, you have to mention 6 digits HSN code. Let me clear you one more thing. In case of import and export, in case of import and export, you have to mention 8-digit HSN code. I think you mentioned नहीं किया हुआ, आप लिख लो. In case of import and export, you have to mention 8-digit HSN code. ठीक है, वो यहाँ पे मेंशन किया, आप लिख लीजिएगा, वैसे मैं स्लाइड प्रोवाइड करूंगा आपको. ठीक है, तो उसमें आपको 8-digit HSN कोड मेंशन करना है अगर आप इंपोर्ट या एक्सपोर्ट कुछ करते हैं तो. इज इट ओके? सो दिस इज द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ HSN. इस पे भी क्वेश्चन आ सकता है. दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. आई होप यहां तक क्लियर है. नाउ लेट अस कम टू बिल ऑफ सप्लाई. When you will issue bill of supply, if you are a registered person and you are supplying any goods which is exempt from tax, या services which is any exempt from tax, there is one more case where you have to issue bill of supply when you are paying tax under composition levy. Have you all done the composition levy? Anyone? Yes, done. Tick. Okay. If someone is asking 4-digit mention from start or last, definitely from start. From starting के 4-digit mention करें. Let us come. Bill of supply 2 केस में issue करने आप. Number 1, if you are providing exempt goods or services. Number 2, if you have opted for the composition levy. आप पढ़ेंगे कॉम्पोजिशन लेवी 1% टैक्स लगता है. रेस्टोरेंट में 5% है, अलग अलग है. सर्विसेज में 6% है. इन दैट केस यू हैव टू इशू. इन दैट केस ऑल्सो यू हैव टू इशू बिल ऑफ सप्लाई. ओके. कैन एनीवन राइट इन द चैट बॉक्स व्हाई इन केस ऑफ कॉम्पोजिशन लेवी वी आर इशूइंग बिल ऑफ सप्लाई इन स्पाइट ऑफ द फैक्ट देयर इज टैक्स इन्वॉल्व 1% या 5%? छोटा है लेकिन टैक्स तो ही है. Then why still bill of supply? Can anyone answer? Someone has written concessional tax rate, no ITC. Not a correct answer. Anyone else? Because composition supplier cannot claim. Yes, this is the correct answer. Nayan Patil. Tax cannot be collected from the recipient because when I issue tax invoice, what I do, I write the tax element and I collect the tax from the recipient. In this case, in case of Composition levy, I can't collect the tax from the recipient. The tax is being paid by the supplier from its own pocket. That's why यहां पे आप टैक्स इनवॉइस नहीं बना के क्या करेंगे, बिल ऑफ सप्लाई ही दे। ठीक है, चलिए वी कम बैक। तो ये दो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट इसके अंदर में। फाइन, नेक्स्ट, प्रोविजन फॉर कंसोलिडेटेड इनवॉइस एंड सेल्फ इनवॉइस इक्वली एप्लीकेबल। याद है ना, कंसोलिडेटेड इनवॉइस 200 रुपया से नीचे वाला वो यहां पे भी एप्लीकेबल होगा। ओके, नाउ सपोज अ पर्सन इज इशूइंग और सप्लाइंग टैक्सेबल एज वेल एज एग्जम्प्ट, कुछ दोनों कर रहा है। तो इन दैट केस वो जो इश्यू करेगा दैट विल बी इनवॉइस कम बिल ऑफ सप्लाई। ओके, उसको क्या बोलेंगे हम लोग, इनवॉइस कम बिल ऑफ सप्लाई। वन मोर थिंग, अगर आपके गुड्स एग्जेम्प्टेड है तो आप जीएसटी लॉ तो काफी हद तक आपके लिए एप्लीकेबल नहीं है, तो आप कोई दूसरा लॉ में कोई इनवॉइस इशू कर रहे हैं, दैट विल बी डीम्ड टू बी द बिल ऑफ सप्लाई फॉर दिस पर्पज। मतलब ऐसा नहीं है कि आपको इसके लिए फिर अलग से एक और बिल ऑफ सप्लाई इशू करना हो। आप कोई भी डॉक्यूमेंट इशू करें कोई भी और लॉ के कारण, दैट विल बी डीम्ड टू बी द बिल ऑफ सप्लाई। नेक्स्ट, receipt voucher, refund voucher. What is this? Look, we issue invoice on a particular day that we have already discussed. But take a situation where I'm receiving advance. I'm not liable to issue invoice now. मेरे को भी invoice issue नहीं करना, क्योंकि लॉ बोलता भी नहीं इश्यू करने के। I have received advance. Okay. So in that case, what I will do, if I am not issuing tax invoice, what I will do, I have to issue what? One receipt voucher. ठीक है, तो रिसिप्ट वाउचर कब इशू करना है? जब आप कोई क्या कर रहे हैं, एडवांस इशू कर रहे हैं, एट दैट टाइम यू हैव टू इशू द रिसिप्ट वाउचर। आपको रिसिप्ट वाउचर इशू करना हो। मेनली दिस कॉन्सेप्ट इज with respect to services now, because in case of services you have to pay the taxes even if you receive advance. आप अगर एडवांस रिसीव करेंगे तो उसमें भी आपको क्या करना है, टैक्स पे करना है। यू हैव टू पे टैक्स ऑन एडवांस। सो इन दैट केस व्हाट वी डू, वी इशू अ रिसिप्ट वाउचर। In the receipt voucher we'll mention all the details, rate of tax क्या वैल्यू, वो सारी डिटेल मेंशन करके हम लोग रिसिप्ट वाउचर इशू करेंगे, और जो टैक्स कलेक्ट करेंगे वो टैक्स हम लोग क्या करेंगे, जीएसटी में जमा कर देंगे। ओके, बट देयर इज वन क्वेश्चन। सपोज आप किसी ऐसी शॉप में हैं जहां पे 5% रेट की आइटम भी है, 12% का भी है और 18% का भी। आपको कुछ गुड्स खरीदना है, छोड़िए गुड्स का एग्जांपल नहीं लेते, बेटर रहेगा सर्विस का एग्जांपल लेते हैं, कि मेनली अब टैक्स तो सर्विस में है। इन केस ऑफ गुड्स प्रीवियसली देयर वाज टैक्स, अभी टैक्स नहीं, एडवांस के ऊपर देयर इज नो टैक्स। सो अपने एक सर्विस का एग्जांपल लेते हैं। से फॉर एग्जांपल कि हम कोई सर्विस प्रोवाइड करें, उसका 18% का रेट है, और कोई एक सर्विस से मान लो 5% की रेट है, 12% की रेट है। हमने उससे 1 लाख रुपए एडवांस ले लिया। अगर वो मुझे ये बता देता है कि दिस एडवांस इज फॉर 18%, देन इट इज फाइन, नॉट अ प्रॉब्लम। और इफ ही सेज दैट दिस एडवांस इज फॉर 12% वाली सर्विस, देन ऑल्सो नो प्रॉब्लम। बट द प्रॉब्लम इज कि व्हेन ही नेवर सेज कि what kind of service will he avail? Whether he will take the services of 5% or 12% or 18%. Let me give you one practical example. Banquet and catering services. In case of catering services, GST rate is 5%. But if you take only banquet, then GST rate is 18%. I went to one banquet hall and I negotiated, I discussed the deal. He told all the commercials, but still I am not decided that whether I should take only banquet from him or should I take banquet plus catering from him. If I take banquet plus catering, then GST rate will be 5%. But if I take only banquet, then GST rate will be 18%. So I am not decided yet. But I want to block the date. मैं date block करना चाहता हूँ so that the date is not sold out to someone else. So I gave advance of rupees 5 lakhs. And I reserved my decision that I will be deciding after 1 month whether I'll be taking banquet or whether I'll be taking catering also. So here what is happening? We don't know the tax rate. Banquet is also a service. Catering is also a service. So in both cases, I am supposed to pay GST on advance also. But it's not decided कि मैं उससे catering लूंगा कि banquet लूंगा. So what the law says, if it is not decided, then assume the GST rate to be 18%. बाद में जो होगा adjust कर लेंगे, लेकिन for the time being, you have to assume the GST rate to be 18%. आपको 18% मान के टैक्स जमा करना होगा. And if nature of supply is not determined कि वो इंट्रास्टेट है कि इंटरस्टेट है, तो भी आपको assume इंटरस्टेट मान के हम लोग को टैक्स डिपॉजिट करेगा. ओके, सो व्हाट एम आई सेइंग? अगर टैक्स रेट नहीं पता एग्जैक्टली, देन वी हैव टू टेक 18%. और अगर नेचर ऑफ सप्लाई नहीं पता, वी विल अज्यूम इंटरस्टेट सप्लाई. ओके, now there can be two possibilities after taking the advance. Number one, that advance actually got converted into the consideration because I provided the services. Second, I terminated the contract, so I had to refund the advance that I had taken. Let us come to the first case. I received the advance, I paid the tax. Now actual service has been given. So now I will issue tax invoice, but I don't have to pay the tax again because tax has already been paid. But there can be a possibility that we have received the advance of rupees 5 lakhs, but in actual consideration was 8 lakhs. So what will I do? I will issue the invoice of rupees 8 lakhs. जो भी इसके ऊपर टैक्स होगा, that will be adjusted with the tax already paid at the time of advance, and differential amount will be paid now. तो जब हम invoice issue करेंगे, invoice full amount का issue होगा, कुछ पे already tax paid है, तो difference हमको अभी क्या करना होगा? Pay करना होगा. Okay. सेकेंड पॉसिबिलिटी, हमने एडवांस लिया लेकिन कॉन्ट्रैक्ट कैंसिल हो गया. सो आई एम रिफंडिंग द एडवांस. तो जब मैं एडवांस रिफंड करूंगा, व्हाट विल आई हैव टू डू? आई हैव टू इशू वन रिफंड वाउचर. हम रिफंड वाउचर इशू करेंगे, उसको पूरा पैसा वापस दे देंगे. तो जो मैंने ऑलरेडी टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट में पे कर दिया, दो ऑप्शन उसके लिए, या तो मैं रिफंड भी ले सकता हूं या मेरी कोई फ्यूचर की कोई दूसरी टैक्स लायबिलिटी है उसके साथ में एडजस्ट भी कर सके. ओके, so this is the whole concept. Let us read this once. A registered person shall, on receipt of advance payment with respect to any supply of goods or services or both, issue a receipt voucher evidencing receipt of such payment. उसने ये पेमेंट रिसीव किया, उसका प्रूफ के लिए रिसिप्ट वाउचर इशू करेगा. Where at the time of receipt of advance, rate of tax is not determinable. Rate of tax नहीं मालूम, कोई बात नहीं, आपको क्या लेना होगा, 18% लेना. You have to take 18%. Nature of supply not determinable, कोई बात नहीं, you have to treat interstate supply. आपको उसे इंटरस्टेट सप्लाई ट्रीट करना. You have to assume it to be interstate. Okay. Last point, अगर आपने रिफंड कर देना, however, if subsequently no supply is made and no tax invoice is issued in pursuance thereof, the said registered person may issue to the person who had made the payment a refund voucher against such payment. Refund voucher issue कर देगा मतलब he will refund the whole amount with tax. सारा पैसा उसको वापस कर देगा. ओके, होप दिस पॉइंट इज क्लियर. एक बार रीड कर लीजिए इसको. रिसिप्ट वाउचर एंड द रिफंड वाउचर. Check. Now, next point. Payment voucher. This payment voucher is issued when you are liable to pay tax under RCM basis. जब आप सप्लायर को पेमेंट कर रहे हैं आरसीएम, आपकी से फॉर एग्जांपल लीगल फी, यू आर पेइंग टू एन एडवोकेट, आप एक एडवोकेट को पे कर रहे हैं, लीगल फी पे कर रहे हैं, तो ऑन दैट यू आर सपोज टू पे RCM. In that case, at the time of making payment to the supplier, you have to issue what? Payment voucher आपको issue करना. Okay, let's read. A registered person who is liable to pay tax under RCM shall issue a payment voucher at the time of making payment to the supplier. Supplier को payment करने के time का payment voucher issue करें. This is simple. Okay. One question is there. Sir, if refund voucher is issued, then with that, is there requirement of issue credit note or voucher itself is sufficient? Look, concept of credit note comes when you issue the invoice. आप यहाँ पे invoice तो issue नहीं किए. You have just issued what? A refund receipt voucher, और आपने जो पैसा लिया वो ऑन अकाउंट खड़ा है जो आप रिफंड कर दे रहे हैं. तो इन दिस केस देयर विल बी नो कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ क्रेडिट. ओके, लेट्स प्रोसीड फर्दर. रिवाइज टैक्स इनवॉइस क्रेडिट और डेबिट को, खाली हम लोग रिवाइज टैक्स इनवॉइस की बात कर रहे हैं अभी. व्हाट इज दिस रिवाइज टैक्स इनवॉइस? दिस इज इंटरेस्टिंग कॉन्सेप्ट. देखिए, सपोज we all know that for taking the registration in GST, 40 lakh is the turnover limit, assuming there is no interstate supply of goods, और ये 40 lakh पूरा का पूरा goods का ही है. Fine. What exactly happened on 28th August? My turnover was, say for example, 25 lakh. Registration not required. On 24th September, my turnover crossed, say for example, 40 lakh cross होके 41 lakh हो गया. I'm supposed to take registration. So what I did, I applied for registration. But we all know to take registration, it will take some time. So registration आते आते 15 days have passed and I got registration on. Say for example, 11th October. मुझे 11th October को registration मिल गया. Okay. Now you say me one thing. After 24th, या rather from 24th और before 24th में फर्क क्या है? Before 24th, I am not supposed to collect any tax. I am not supposed to pay any tax to the government, correct? But from 24, there is a liability to collect tax and pay to the government. Okay. But say me one thing, कि on 25th when I make a sale, can I collect tax from the recipient? Can I issue tax invoice on 25th of September? On this date, can I issue? No, because I am not a registered person. I don't have the registration as on 25th of September. So what should I do? बिजनेस बंद कर देते हैं 10 दिन के लिए, 15 दिन के लिए बिजनेस बंद कर दें. Should I stop doing business? Obviously not. I can't stop doing business. I'll continue the business. Here comes the concept of pricing. When I'll get registration on 11th October, law says for the past 30 days, जितनी भी सप्लाई हुई है फ्रॉम द इफेक्टिव डेट ऑफ रजिस्ट्रेशन, कोई मेरा इफेक्टिव डेट ऑफ रजिस्ट्रेशन क्या होगा? 24 सितंबर. तो मैं वहां से लेके यहां तक का जो भी इनवॉइसेस था वो टैक्स इनवॉइस तो था नहीं. तो व्हाट आई विल डू, आई विल इशू वन मोर इनवॉइस नाउ एंड दैट विल बी नोन एज रिवाइज्ड टैक्स इनवॉइस. मैं रिवाइज टैक्स इनवॉइस इशू करूंगा और उसका फॉर्मेट क्या होगा? बिल्कुल वही फॉर्मेट होगा जो हमने टैक्स इनवॉइस का फॉर्मेट पढ़ा था. सेम वही फॉर्मेट होगा. मैं रिवाइज्ड इनवॉइस इशू करके टैक्स कलेक्ट करके मैं जमा कर दूंगा. तो रिवाइज इनवॉइस का कंसेप्ट कब आएगा? एक ही बार आएगा. इफ यू आर टेकिंग रजिस्ट्रेशन, तो जब आपका रजिस्ट्रेशन आया उसके पहले के पीरियड में, फॉर द period before the date of registration, if you have done any sale, then you have to pay tax on that. For that period, I mean to say 25th से लेके 11th October तक, for whatever sale you have done, you have to issue revised invoice, which will comply all the rules of tax invoice. Okay, so this is the concept of revised invoice. ठीक है, क्योंकि हम पहले रिवाइज इनवॉइस इशू कर नहीं सकते. I can't issue the revised invoice before I get the registration. So once I get the registration, I will issue revised invoice. Okay, fine. One more thing. The recipients, those who are buying from you, they will also get worried. अरे भाई आप मेरे को इनवॉइस नहीं दे रहे, मैं आपसे क्यों खरीदूं, क्योंकि मेरे को तो आईटीसी मिलेगा ही नहीं. You have to ensure them कि once I get the registration, I will issue revised invoice, and on the basis of revised invoice, they will be able to get the ITC. उनको ITC मिल जाएगा उस revised invoice के basis पर. Okay. There is one relaxation given. What is the relaxation? For the buyers who are unregistered in this period, you can issue one consolidated invoice. आप एक consolidated revised invoice issue कर सकते हैं. Make sense? अगर unregistered है, they will not claim ITC in any case. So in that case, there is no need to make separate invoice. One invoice will serve the purpose. But if the recipient is registered, then for every registered person, you have to make a separate invoice. आपको separate invoice बनाना पड़ेगा. ठीक है? Similarly, अगर कोई इंटरेस्ट रेट सेल हो रहा है और वैल्यू 2.5 लाख के अंदर, इंटरेस्ट रेट से वैल्यू 2.5 लाख के अंदर आप कंसोलिडेटेड इनवॉइस बना दीजिए. लेकिन अगर वैल्यू 2,50,000 से ज्यादा है, then you have to make a separate invoice. Fine. Let me consolidate. Revised invoice कब बनाना है? आपकी रजिस्ट्रेशन की लायबिलिटी आ गई 25 तारीख को, लेकिन आपने रजिस्ट्रेशन लिया 11 अक्टूबर. तो 25 से 11 अक्टूबर के बीच में जो भी सप्लाई हुई उसके लिए रिवाइज इनवॉइस बनाना. वो सप्लाई अगर अनरजिस्टर्ड पर्सन को कंसोलिडेटेड बनाना, और अगर वो सप्लाई रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन को तो आपको अलग अलग करके बनाना हो. अगर उस पीरियड की सप्लाई सारी इंटरेस्ट रेट है और 2.5 लाख के अंदर है तो आप कंसोलिडेटेड बना सकते हो. लेकिन अगर इंटरेस्ट रेट सप्लाई है आपकी 2.5 लाख से ज्यादा की है, इन दैट केस यू हैव टू मेक अ सेपरेट इनवॉइस. सो दिस इज द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ रिवाइज्ड इनवॉइस. लेट मी रीड. A registered person may within 1 month from the date of issuance of certificate of registration issue revised invoice against the invoice already issued between the period of effective date of registration and the date of issuance of certificate. मतलब 25 तारीख से लेके 11 तारीख तक का जो भी सेल है उन सबका एक रिवाइज्ड इनवॉइस आप 1 महीना के अंदर बना सकते हो. माने यहां से 11 अक्टूबर से लेके 11 नवंबर तक या 10 नवंबर तक आपको सारा इनवॉइस बनाना है. 1 महीना ये वाला 1 महीना के लिए, बैक वाला नहीं, ये वाला विदिन 1 मंथ आप सारे रिवाइज्ड इनवॉइस बना सकते हो. द टर्म टैक्स इनवॉइस शैल आल्सो इंक्लूड. यहीं से तो सारा कहानी खत्म हो गया. रिवाइज्ड इनवॉइस को टैक्स इनवॉइस बोल दिया. इट मींस all the rules of tax invoice will also be applicable for revised invoice. Within 1 month आपको बनाना है. Okay. Next, a consolidated revised tax invoice in respect of all taxable supplied made to unregistered person. एक consolidated बना सकते हैं. Condition क्या है? Unregistered person होना चाहिए. In case of interest rate supply of value does not exceed 2.5 lakh. If value is within 2,50,000, consolidated revised invoice may be issued separately in respect of all unregistered recipient located in a state. अगर 2.5 लाख के अंदर है, we can issue consolidated revised invoice. Okay. Fine. ये पॉइंट यहां की नहीं है, बाय मिस्टेक आ गया यहां पे. ठीक है ना, इसको ठीक कर लेंगे. आई विल डिस्कस दिस पॉइंट नाउ, बट इट इज नॉट रिलेटेड टू रिवाइज्ड इनवॉइस. आई होप यहां तक क्लियर एकदम. सर, लेट मी टेक द क्वेरी. सर, वी हैव टू इशू फ्रेश रिवाइज्ड इनवॉइस फॉर ऑल. यस. गुड इवनिंग सर. मैंने फाउंडेशन से इंटर डायरेक्ट एंट्री ली है, ये Vanshika is having some technical query with respect to the portal. So I am not the right person. आप इंस्टीट्यूट में एक बार बात करना. So I think they will be able to help you. इनका कोर्स में फाउंडेशन ही दिखा रहा है, बट ये इंटर में आ चुकी हैं. So I think they will be able to resolve your query. Fine. All clear till here? One last point. Look, what happens during some inquiry, some investigation, department notice that you have sold some goods to someone, but you have not paid tax on that. तो डिपार्टमेंट ने कहा चलिए अब आप टैक्स दीजिए विथ इंटरेस्ट एंड पेनल्टी. इन दैट केस जब भी आप इनवॉइस इशू करोगे उसमें जो टैक्स होगा उसका इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट का बेनिफिट रेसिपिएंट को नहीं मिलेगा. तो यू हैव टू मेंशन इन द इनवॉइस का हेडिंग इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट नॉट एडमिसिबल बोल के आपको लिखना होगा. अगर आप कोई डिमांड के अगेंस्ट में टैक्स पे कर रहे हैं तो सिंपल है. आपने मिस्टर ए को सेल किया, इनवॉइस नहीं दिया, बाद में डिपार्टमेंट पकड़ लिया, तब आपने दिया, तो सामने वाले बंदे को इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट इस केस में नहीं मिलेगी. ही विल नॉट बी एबल टू गेट द इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट. इज इट ओके? Revised invoice would be issued within 1 month of getting certificate, right? ये वाली पॉइंट फिर मैं एक्सप्लेन कर रहा हूं. समवन इज आस्किंग, भाई आपने मिस्टर ए को सेल किया, उसको रिकॉर्ड में नहीं लेके आए, बट कहीं पे लिख के रखे थे कागज में. डिपार्टमेंट की सर्च हुई, उसने पकड़ लिया, उसने डिपार्टमेंट ने देखा रहे आपने तो मिस्टर ए को सेल किया था, ये आप टैक्स नहीं दिए, इस पे बुक्स में दिखाई नहीं. तो आपने क्या कहा, ठीक है सर अभी हम टैक्स दे देते हैं. आपने इनवॉइस बना दिया मिस्टर ए के नाम पे 10 लाख रुपीज, 1,80,000 टैक्स, एंड यू पेड द टैक्स एंड यू गेव द इनवॉइस टू मिस्टर ए. On this invoice, you have to write at the top input tax credit not admissible, because ये आप चोरी कर रहे थे, डिपार्टमेंट ने पकड़ा, इसलिए आप दे, तो इसका क्रेडिट रेसिपिएंट को नहीं मिलेगा. आपको इस टैक्स इनवॉइस के ऊपर लिख के देना होगा इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट नॉट एडमिसिबल. ओके, तो कोई भी प्रोसिक्यूशन प्रोसीडिंग्स, इंक्वायरी, ये सब में कोई डिमांड आता और आप टैक्स पे करते हैं, उसका क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा. ओके, ठीक है. आई थिंक आई विल कवर यहीं तक. आपके कोई क्वेश्चन तो पहले पूछ लीजिए. समझ जैसा सितंबर 25 की क्लास कब से स्टार्ट होगी? 25th. आई डोंट हैव एनी आइडिया अबाउट दिस. If person didn't apply for registration within 1 month, and after 2 months registration is done, then sir, revised notice still be from the effective date. Yes. Someone is asking, भाई हम लायबल हो गए थे रजिस्ट्रेशन के लिए 25 सितंबर को, बट आई डिडंट अप्लाई फॉर रजिस्ट्रेशन फॉर 2 months. After 2 months I applied for registration, then also revised invoice concept will be applicable for you. You have to pay taxes, you have to issue revised invoice. ओके, ओएडार सर्विसेज में जोमेटो, अमेजन कवर्ड है क्या? दैट इज नॉट ओएडार सर्विसेज, दैट इज ई कॉमर्स सर्विसेज. डिफरेंस बिटवीन सेल्फ इनवॉइस एंड पेमेंट वाउचर. सेल्फ इनवॉइस इज द इनवॉइस एंड पेमेंट वाउचर इज द डॉक्यूमेंट फॉर पेमेंट. ठीक है सर, मैं एग्जाम के लिए फॉर्म कब निकलेगा? ठीक है, तो आई डोंट हैव एनी आइडिया अबाउट दैट कि फॉर्म कब आएगा. ठीक है, चलिए, तो यहां तक चीजें एकदम क्लियर है. तो आई फील आप लोग यहां तक अपने इंस्टीट्यूट, मैं भी प्रोवाइड कर दूंगा मेरा पीपीटी. इट इज एज गुड एज नोट्स. सर 2 months. सर 2 months एग्जाम्पल स्टडी मटेरियल गो थ्रू दिस चैप्टर. हाँ, स्टडी मटेरियल में जितनी टॉपिक्स मैंने कराई है, आधी हो गई, आधी हम लोग नेक्स्ट क्लास में कवर करेंगे. तो आपका पूरा हो जाएगा, बट ये टॉपिक वाइज ही आपके स्टडी मटेरियल में विल सॉल्व द क्वेश्चंस आल्सो इन द नेक्स्ट क्लास. तो टिल देन यू कैन डू वन थिंग, यू कैन रिवाइज ऑल द कॉन्सेप्ट्स दैट आई डिस्कस. और फिर कुछ क्वेरी होगी तो कल बिफोर द क्लास, नेक्स्ट क्लास में, आई मीन डे आफ्टर टुमारो, we will take all the queries. Sir, if excess tax is paid by mistake, then what will happen? There are two options. If you pay excess tax, you can adjust with your other liability and you can also claim the refund. आप refund भी claim कर सकते हैं इसका. Okay. So if you have any other questions, I can deal those. तो नेक्स्ट क्लास में मेनली विल डिस्कस द क्रेडिट नोट्स, डेबिट नोट, ई इनवॉइस, ठीक है ना, और इनवॉइस इन सम स्पेशल केसेस, ये सब हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे नेक्स्ट क्लास में. ओके, ऑल दिस विल बी डिस्कस्ड इन द नेक्स्ट क्लास एंड विल सॉल्व सम क्वेश्चंस. कुछ क्वेश्चंस भी हम लोग सॉल्व करेंगे नेक्स्ट क्लास में. अगर आप 2 months के बाद, अच्छा राइट, यू आर सेइंग कि इफ यू हैव टेकन रजिस्ट्रेशन आफ्टर 2 months, आपको जिस दिन आपको सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ रजिस्ट्रेशन मिला उसके 1 month के अंदर आपको इनवॉइस बनाना है. तो आप 2 महीने बाद रजिस्ट्रेशन ले रहे, उससे दिक्कत नहीं है. आपको रिवाइज इनवॉइस बनाना होगा जब आपका रजिस्ट्रेशन आया वहां से 1 महीने के अंदर में. ओके, तो आई थिंक आई हैव डन फ्रॉम माय साइड फॉर टुडे. इफ यू हैव एनी क्वेरी यू कैन आस्क, अदरवाइज वी कैन कॉल इट अ डे. बट सर आईटीसी विल नॉट बी एडमिसिबल इन दिस केस. नो, ऐसा नहीं कि आईटीसी इस केस में एडमिसिबल होगा. In this case, ITC will be admissible. So any other questions? So is technical team over there? Yes, late registration is there. On that, they have to pay the interest. Okay. So thank you so much. Is anyone there from the institute? Yes, sir. Thank you.